I woke up early during surgery prep and heard my husband on the phone through the curtain. Once she's under, it's handled. I kept my eyes shut for 11 more minutes. He still doesn't know I was awake. The first thing that came back was the smell of the blanket. They put a warmed blanket on you in pre-op. It smells like a laundromat, and it is the single kindest thing that happens in a hospital. And I remember thinking, in the soft, stupid way you think under pre-medication, oh, that's nice. And then thinking more slowly, that's odd. I shouldn't be thinking anything. I did not open my eyes. There is no decision in that. My eyelids were extremely heavy, and opening them was a project. And by the time I'd have got round to it, Teague had already said the first sentence. He was on the other side of the curtain, about 4 feet away, at a volume people use when they think a curtain is a wall. No, she's already gone. They gave her the thing 20 minutes ago. Pause. It's on file. I filed it. I'm the alternate agent. It's page 2. Yes, that's what I'm telling you. Pause. Somebody's shoes squeaked past. Somewhere a machine did 3 beeps and stopped. No, she won't. She can't. That's the whole point of the window. And then in the same tone he uses to tell a contractor he'll be there Tuesday. Once she's under, it's handled. I did not move. I want to be very clear that I did not move because everything that came after depended on my not moving, and because for about 4 seconds I could not have moved if the building had been on fire. I counted the clock on the wall opposite by listening. That sounds insane. It was an analog clock, and it had a tick you could hear in the gaps, and I lay there with a warm blanket on me and my heart doing something enormous and slow, and I counted. 11 minutes. Then a nurse came and said my name, and I woke up. He still doesn't know. I'd been on that surgery list for 14 months. L4, L5, degenerative, the kind of thing where a surgeon puts an x-ray up and says, well, there it is, like the two of you have solved something. 2 cancellations already. Once because of a bed, once because I canceled, and both times Teague was extremely good about it. I need to explain what I mean by good, because if I don't, none of the rest of this makes sense. Teague Draley has been my husband for 19 years. He does contracts consulting for hospital systems, which means he spends his life in rooms with administrators explaining why the thing they signed does not do what they think it does. He is the person you want with you at a car dealership, at a border, in a room where somebody has just said the word, unfortunately. He is calm the way some people are tall. When my mother had her stroke, Teague was the one who wrote down the neurologist's name. He was the one who noticed the discharge planner had put the wrong date on a form. He drove me to that hospital 4 nights a week for 11 weeks and never once said the sentence, "Are you sure you want to keep doing this?" Which I know for a fact he was thinking, because I was thinking it too. I do not have a story here about a man who was cruel to me for 19 years. I have the other story, which I think is worse, and which is why I've never told anyone this until now. My mother is Adeline Okonkwo. She was 78. She had a hemorrhagic stroke on a Tuesday in April in her own kitchen while making tea, which she would have hated, because she thought tea in the afternoon was a habit for people with nothing to do. By the 11th week, she was on a ventilator on the 6th floor and had been on it for 51 days, and there had been 3 meetings, in which a very kind palliative care physician had said the words quality of life to me in a small room with a box of tissues on the table. I said no 3 times. I am her healthcare proxy. I have been since 2019. I said no in April, and I said no in May, and I said no on the 4th of June with my brother on speakerphone from Calgary saying, "Nell, I'll back whatever you want." I want to be honest about my reasons because I've had a long time to look at them. Some of it was hope, not much. By June, it wasn't really hope anymore. Most of it was that I am the child who left. I moved 4 states away at 26, and I called on Sundays, and I missed a lot of things. And there is a version of me who has spent her whole adult life sending money instead of showing up, and that woman was not going to be the one to say stop. I could not make my hand do it. So my mother lay in a bed on the 6th floor of a hospital, and I lay in a bed on the 4th floor of the same hospital, 11 weeks later, listening to my husband schedule something through a curtain. Here's what the window is. And I did not know any of this at 6:40 that morning. I worked it out over 4 days, and I want to put it in one place because it's the entire mechanism, and it is completely legal, and it is available to anybody reading this. A healthcare proxy names an agent. Mine names me for my mother. It also names an alternate agent who steps in if the primary is unavailable. And the standard language, the language in the form the hospital's own website hands out, defines unavailable to include temporarily incapacitated. Anesthesia is temporary incapacitation. For the 4 hours I was going to be face down on a table with a fusion cage going into my spine, I was not going to be my mother's healthcare proxy. Somebody else was. I initialed that clause in 2022. I know I did because I have seen my own initials on it since, in blue biro, in the corner of a page. I signed it in a waiting room. Teague was having a hernia repair, and we'd been meaning to sort out the paperwork for years. And there was a lawyer's office in the same building, and we did the whole lot in 40 minutes with a takeaway coffee going cold on a side table. Directives, wills, powers of attorney, a stack about a centimeter thick. I read the wills. I remember reading the wills. I did not read page 2 of my mother's directive, because my mother's directive was hers and had been drafted separately in 2019, and was, I thought, already on file. What we were doing that day was a housekeeping refile. That is the single most expensive 40 minutes of my life. The nurse said my name, and I made a sound and blinked slowly, and she said, "There she is," and the whole world came back at the wrong speed. Teague came round the curtain with 2 coffees he was not allowed to bring in, and put one one on the little rolling table where I couldn't reach it. He'd shaved. He'd been up since 5, and he'd shaved. Hey, he said, you went in and out. They said you might. What time is it? 7:10. You're up in about 20 minutes. He squeezed my foot through the blanket. He always does that. It's a thing he's done since we were 26. And I lay there and looked at my husband and had a very cold, very clear, entirely practical thought, which was, if I say one word about that phone call, this stops being a thing he is doing and starts being a thing we are fighting about, and he will simply do it a different way in a month. I had one advantage in the entire world, and it was that he thought I was asleep. So I said, okay. And then, at 7:31, wheeled through the double doors with the ceiling tiles going past, I said, my chest hurts. I said it again in the corridor. I said it louder outside the OR, and I said the word pressure, and I said the word arm, because I am 44 years old and I have read the same women's health articles as everyone else. An entire operating theater stood down in about 90 seconds. Somebody I never saw put a hand flat on my sternum and said, Nell, stay with me. When did this start? I have never been so ashamed of anything in my life, and I would do it again this afternoon. They canceled the case and admitted me to the 4th floor for a workup I did not need, and that bought me 31 hours. The workup was 3 sets of troponins 12 hours apart, an EKG that a fellow looked at for a long time, and an echo on a portable machine pushed in by a technician who was eating a granola bar in the corridor beforehand and apologized for the cold gel 4 separate times. They were all completely normal, which surprised nobody, and a cardiologist told me kindly that stress does this and that it is real, and I said thank you, and there is a note somewhere in my chart with the word anxiety in it that I will be carrying around for the rest of my life. 31 hours in which my husband slept in a vinyl chair beside my bed with his coat over him. He went down to the gift shop and bought me a toothbrush and one of those tiny tubes of paste because they'd sent my bag home with my sister-in-law. He held a plastic cup of water with a bendy straw in it for me at 2 in the morning when I couldn't sit up properly. He told the cardiology fellow the exact date of my last EKG from memory, the date, not the year, and then apologized for being that guy, and the fellow laughed. At about 4 in the morning, I woke up and he was awake, sitting in that chair in the dark, not on his phone, just sitting. I said, go home and sleep. He said, I'm all right. I lay 18 inches from him for 31 hours and let him take care of me and did not say one single word. That is the part people do not believe. They believe the phone call. They believe the paperwork. What they cannot believe is that I ate a hospital breakfast off a tray with a man I had just heard schedule my mother's death and asked him whether he'd remembered to feed the cat. But you have to understand where I was standing. I had 9 words. That is all I had in the world. 9 words heard through a curtain by a woman with midazolam in her, and midazolam is a drug whose entire clinical purpose is to stop you remembering things. It is given specifically so that you will not be able to testify to your own mourning. If I had said one sentence to one nurse, that is precisely the reply I would have been handed, and it would have been handed to me gently, by somebody with a lanyard, in a voice trained on people like me. You were pre-medicated, Mrs. Draley. That happens. And it would have gone in the chart under the other word. There was a second reason, and it took me until about the 20th hour to admit it. If I said it out loud, he would stop. That's all. He would stop and be careful and be sorry. And I would spend the rest of my life married to a man I had caught doing something I could never prove and would never be able to stop thinking about. I did not want him to stop. I wanted to know what he was doing. I needed paper. I got the first piece of paper by asking for it, which is the thing nobody expects. At about 11 the next morning, I pressed the call button and asked the charge nurse whether, as my mother's proxy, I could get a copy of her advance directive from my own records, because I wanted to reread something. She said, of course, hun, and it took 40 minutes. I want to say that again. 40 minutes. The document that was about to end my marriage was handed to me by a woman with a lanyard who apologized that it had taken so long because the printer on 6 was out. It was 4 pages. I had seen 3 of them. Page 2 had a section I had absolutely never read, headed alternate agent, and on the line under it, in printed capitals, was my husband's name and his mobile number. And along the top edge, in the pale gray a fax machine leaves, was a header, 0641, a Tuesday, 8 days before my surgery date. I read that timestamp about 40 times. My hands were doing something I couldn't stop, and I had to put the pages flat on the blanket and hold them down with my forearms, because the appointment of an alternate agent is a perfectly ordinary thing for a document to contain. It is not sinister. Half the directives in that building have one. What is not ordinary is filing it at 6:41 in the morning, 8 days before the 1 4-hour window in the entire calendar year when it would come into effect. The second piece of paper came from a jingle. This is the part that makes me sound unwell, and I have made my peace with that. The person on the other end of that phone call had been on hold at some point because I heard the music. 4 notes, up, down, up, then a woman's recorded voice too muffled to make out, then the 4 notes again. I had it stuck in my head for 2 days the way you do. On the second afternoon, I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone and rang the hospital's main switchboard and asked, one at a time, to be put through to departments and listen to what I got. Records, silence, and a click. Billing, an actual person immediately, which surprised me. Patient relations, a different tune, longer, orchestral. The ethics consultation service line, 4 notes, up, down, up. I hung up so fast I dropped the phone on the floor. Then I sat there for a long while, with my heart going and one very specific thought forming, which which was, "You don't call an ethics committee to commit a murder. You call an ethics committee to get permission." That was the first moment I understood I might have the wrong story. I didn't stop. I want to be honest about that too. I understood I might have the wrong story, and I kept going, because by then I needed to know what the right one was more than I needed anything else. The ethics committee's consultation calendar is not public, but a consultation generates a note in the chart, and I am my mother's proxy, and a proxy can request the chart. There was a consult open, requested 9 days earlier. Requesting party, alternate agent, subject line, discordance between documented patient wishes and primary agent decisions. Scheduled for the following Friday at 9. My rescheduled surgery was the following Friday at 7:15. I called the lawyer on the Wednesday from a stairwell because it was the only place in that building where nobody would come round a corner. Her name is Hesper Vaillancourt, and she has been doing estates and elder law for 26 years, and she has a way of listening in complete silence that makes you tell her everything, including the parts you did not intend to say. I read her the clause. She said, "Yes, that's the standard NCCUSL language. It's in about 40 states. So for 4 hours, for however long you're under, plus recovery, plus however long it takes somebody to certify that you've got capacity back." She said it without any drama at all, which was somehow worse. In practice, on a fusion, you're looking at most of a day, and in that time he is the agent. He can do anything you could do. A pause. "Mrs. Draley, I want to say something, and I want you to hear it in the right order. There is nothing improper about naming an alternate. It is good practice. I recommend it in every directive I draft. He filed it 8 days ago." "Yes," said Hesper. "That's the part I'd like to look at. The reason was in the mail, and I'd been walking past it since April. Long-term acute care insurance. My mother's policy, which had been quietly and brilliantly paying for 11 weeks of a ventilator, terminated benefits at day 84. Day 84 was 14 days out. After that, a private rate that ran to a shade over $19,000 a month billed to the responsible party, and the responsible party was me, and everything I have is in an account with both our names on it. I found the letter in the pile on the hall table under a catalog and a parish newsletter, opened, refolded, put back. He'd read it. Of course he'd read it. He reads everything. It is literally his job. And here is where my mind went, standing in my own hallway holding an insurance letter. There it is. $19,000 a month. That's the motive. That's the whole thing. I actually felt relief, which tells you something unattractive about me. I had spent 4 days hoping my husband was a monster rather than something more complicated. I put the letter in my bag with the directive and the ethics consult and the fax header, and on Thursday afternoon I went to my mother's house, alone, to look for something I could take to a police station. I have to describe that house for a second, because I had not been alone in it since April. There was still a mug upside down on the drainer. There was a cardigan on the back of a chair with a tissue in the sleeve. The calendar on the wall was still on April, with 3 things written on it in her handwriting: a hairdresser, a bin day, and the word Nell on a Sunday, with a question mark, because she never knew until Saturday whether I was coming. I stood in that kitchen for about 4 minutes and did not cry and could not have told you why not. Then I went upstairs to find a document I could take to a police station, and I was extremely methodical about it, because being methodical is the only thing I have ever been able to do with grief. What I found was a shoebox. It was in the bottom of her wardrobe under a bag of wool she had been not knitting with for 9 years. Bank statements from the 90s held together with a bulldog clip, a rosary, a passport with 3 countries stamped in it and nowhere near enough of them, a photograph of my father in a shirt I remember, about 40 birthday cards she had been sent and kept, in no order at all, and 4 pages of lined paper in her own handwriting, folded in half. It was dated 2019. It was not addressed to anybody. It started, "If it comes to it, this is what I want, and I am putting it down because I know exactly how my daughter is." I read it sitting on her bedroom floor with my back against the wardrobe door. It is 4 pages, and it is unbearable, and it is very funny in 2 places, and about halfway down the second page my mother wrote, "About machines," in a hand that was still completely steady. "I have seen it done to Kahinda, and I will not have it done to me. Nell will not be able to. She will hold on out of love, and she will call it hope, and she will not be able to make her hand do it, so it must not be her." And I sat on that floor for a very long time, in a house that smelled the way it always did, and understood that my mother had written down the exact thing I had said to myself in a hospital corridor in June, 4 years before I said it. She will not be able to make her hand do it. Then I turned to the last page to see who she had named. The last page says nothing about an agent. There are no witnesses. There is no notary. It is a woman's letter to nobody, in biro, on lined paper from a pad, and in the state I live in, it is worth precisely nothing. Thursday night, 11:20, 6th floor. I had gone up to sit with her, which I had done nearly every night for 12 weeks, and I had the shoebox letter, and I had the directive, and I put them side by side on the tray table, because I wanted to look at the 2 of them together, and it took me about 90 seconds to see it. The signature on page 2 of the directive, under alternate agent, next to my husband's printed name, is my mother's. The signature on page 1, from 2019, is also my mother's. They are not the same signature, and the difference is not the difference you would expect. The 2019 one is a stroke patient's post-rehab signature. Legible, effortful, the O made in 2 strokes because her hand had stopped doing the full loop. The one on page 2 is beautiful. It's her signature from 20 years ago. It's the signature that's on the inside cover of the cookbook she gave me for my wedding. A single unbroken loop loop with a flourish coming off the second end, and it is on the birthday card in the shoebox, the one from 2019. Same loop, same flourish, same tiny break at the top of the O where her pen lifted, in exactly the same place, at exactly the same angle, because it is not a similar signature. It is the same signature. Traced. I was still sitting there with the 2 pages when the door moved. Teague was in the doorway with 2 coffees. He'd been standing there, I think, for a while. You found the box, he said. I'm not going to write out the whole of it. Some of it was mine, but he did not deny a single thing, and that is what I still cannot get past, and probably never will. He put the coffees down on the windowsill. He pulled the visitor chair around so it faced me instead of the bed, and then he answered every question in order, in the calm, complete sequential way he answers a question about a contract, with the dates. He found the letter in June, 3 weeks after I said no for the 3rd time. He was looking for her building society passbook, because the direct debits needed sorting and nobody else was going to do it. He read it in her kitchen, standing up, and then sat down. He took it to a lawyer, not Hesper, some man in a strip mall off Route 9, chosen, I assume, precisely because he wasn't Hesper, and was told what anybody would have told him. Not a directive, not witnessed, not notarized. A letter. Beautiful, moving, and worth nothing at all in a hospital. He told me to talk to you, Teague said. And I'd already talked to you 3 times. He wasn't accusing me of anything. That was somehow the worst part. Nell, in the June meeting, you didn't argue with the doctor. Do you remember that? He said his piece, and you said, I understand. And then you said no. You weren't disagreeing with him. You just couldn't do it. I said, I know you know. He sat on it for 4 weeks. He told me exactly what he did in those 4 weeks, which was nothing. And he told me he kept the letter in the glove box and read it in car parks, which is a thing I now know 2 men have done with 2 different pieces of paper, and I have no idea what to make of it. And then, at the end of July, he called Bettina Sowles. She is a notary. She has commissioned somewhere around 400 documents for him over the last decade of contracts work. Signature pages, affidavits, certifications, the endless paper of a man whose whole job is paper. He has sent her a Christmas hamper every year since 2017. He asked her to attest an alternate agent designation on an advance directive. He told her the principal had executed it in front of him. And she notarized it, because she has known him for 9 years, and because in 9 years he has never once handed her a single thing that was not exactly what he said it was. That is the whole of what he spent on her. 9 years of being completely straight, cashed in once. The signature he traced off a birthday card at our kitchen table, with a light box he bought for $11 and threw away afterwards in a bin at a petrol station. I asked him how long it took. He said, about 2 hours. Then he said, I did it 4 times before I got one I'd have believed. I asked him what he did with the other 3. Burned them in the grill, he said, in October. There was a whole thing about it being too wet. I remembered that. I remembered standing at the back door in a jumper telling my husband he was never going to get that lit. And then, when there was nothing left to lay out, he said the only thing that actually mattered to him, and he said it leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, in a voice I had never heard from him in 19 years. Nell, read the letter. Read what she wrote. Tell me I was wrong. And I couldn't. That's the whole thing. I sat in a chair beside my mother's bed at midnight, with a forged document in my lap, and my husband 4 feet away asking me to tell him he was wrong, and I could not do it, because he wasn't. So I said the other thing. I said, you were right, and you're going to lose everything for it, and I'm the one who's going to do it. He nodded. He'd known that for about 10 minutes. At 7:40 on Friday morning, I signed the withdrawal order myself, not because he made me, not because a committee was meeting at 9. I signed it because my mother wrote 4 pages in 2019 telling me what she wanted and telling me accurately that I would not be able to do it. And there is a version of being somebody's daughter where you get to be the one who proves her wrong. She died at 4:15 that afternoon. I was there. My brother was on a phone propped against a water jug. It was very quiet, and it took a long time, and it was not like anything anyone tells you. At 8:15 that morning, before any of that, I had walked down to the 2nd floor and handed the risk management office a directive, a birthday card, a fax header, and a photocopy of 4 pages of lined paper. The consequences took 11 months, and they landed the way things actually land, which is to say slowly and in the mail. Bettina Sowles surrendered her notarial commission and pleaded to a misdemeanor. She wrote me a letter. I have not answered it, and I don't think I'm going to. Teague was charged with forgery of a notarized instrument and unlawful use of a healthcare directive. He pleaded 18 months probation, 400 hours, restitution of the hospital's investigation costs, and a felony conviction that means he will never again be permitted to hold a contract with a hospital system in this state or any state that checks, which is all of them, which is the only work he has ever done, which he knew before he ever picked up a pen and a birthday card. He never once asked me not to file it. Not on the 6th floor at midnight, not in the car, not in the 11 months after. The only thing he ever said about it was on the courthouse steps, and what he said was, you did it right. I filed in the spring. I kept the house. It was not contested, and it was not ugly, and it was the worst thing I have ever been through, including the 4th floor and including the 6th. I had the surgery in March. My cousin drove me. When they took me into pre-op and put the warmed blanket on, I asked the anesthesiologist, Dr. Ilona Braddock, who has been doing this for 22 years and who did not deserve me, whether there was any chance I'd come up early. She said it happens sometimes, and that most people don't remember. I said, some people do. She said, some people do, and then she asked me to count backwards from 10. 1, and I got to 7. There are 2 people alive who know I was awake in that bay. One of them is a woman in scrubs I will never see again, and I only told her afterward in recovery half under, and I doubt she remembers. Teague doesn't know. He has never known. He thinks I found the shoebox.